All right, folks. Well, here we are. Labor Day has come and gone. And what does that mean? It means we are now officially in the home stretch in the race for the midterms. Now just 63 days away. And you are watching a show we are calling 218. That was supposed to work. Maybe I pressed this button and it will. 218, as in the magic number for control of the House. Whichever party ends up with 218 seats at least this November will control the House. Will control the House for Democrats. Their best chance at that in 8 years since they lost control to Republicans. So you are watching 218 here, and I am your host for all things elections, Steve Kornacki. I'm going to be here each and every Tuesday between now and November 6th. We're going to look at the race for the House. Yes, we're also going to look at the race for the Senate. The number there, of course, really it's 51, because Democrats, if they want to get a majority, they need 51. Republicans could land on 50. Then what would happen? Vice President Mike Pence would break the tie, and Republicans would officially have 51 votes in the Senate. So 51 in the Senate, 218 in the House. We're going to break down all the key developments, all the key races, all the polls, all the plot twists, all the exciting, unexpected turns in drama. We will be breaking them down every Tuesday right here. So make this an appointment between now and Election Day. And we figure we would start by setting the stage, big picture here. When it comes to this race for 218 in the House, when it comes to this race for 51 Senate seats, what looms larger than anything else over the entire political landscape? Of course, it is Donald Trump. And how is Donald Trump going to factor into this? Well, one number to keep an eye on between now and Election Day when it comes to Donald Trump, it is, not surprisingly, his approval rating. Where exactly does his approval rating fall on Election Day? What direction is it going between now and Election Day? How popular is he? How unpopular is he on Election Day? That could be the single most important variable. And on that front, we've had some news in the past few days, and it suggests a couple of possibilities. So check this out. Polling we've gotten in the last couple days that's been released. This one got all the headlines from the Washington Post and ABC News. They put it out last Friday. They put Trump's approval rating at 36%. They say that was the lowest they had measured a president heading into a midterm. 36%, also a lot lower than we had been seeing Trump in a lot of the polling really over the last 6 months or so. You could tie that drop that ABC was picking up on, maybe that news about Michael Cohen, maybe the news about Paul Manafort, maybe both of those together, maybe some of the other stories sort of leaking out from inside the White House. But anyway, that got a lot of attention when it came out. A couple other polls have come out in the last few days, too, showing a bit of a, not quite as low there as the 36. So when you average everything together, this is what you get. You get Donald Trump's approval rating. This, according to Real Clear Politics, they average them all together. They got him right now, as we go on the air, at 41.8%. Now, this is interesting for a couple reasons. Number one, that is a drop. Real Clear Politics. Every poll that comes out anywhere in the country on Trump, they're thrown into the average at all times. It's constantly churning, constantly changing. That is down about 2 points from where Trump was in the Real Clear Politics poll about a week ago. So the idea that he's taken some kind of a hit here in the last week, that seems to be real. The question is, how big is that hit? Are we only starting to see the start of it here? A week from now, will we be talking about him being even lower, or is it going to stabilize? Is it going to flatline? Is he even going to go back up a couple points? So that's sort of the question here. Why is this so important? Because if you talk to Republicans and you say, where do you need Donald Trump's popularity to be? Where do you need his approval rating to be if you want to keep the House? If you want to get those 218 in the House? If you want to hold on to the Senate? Where do you need him to be on Election Day? They're going to tell you, 44, 45%. They want him in the mid-40s. The more you get into the mid-40s, the better Republicans feel about the ability of their candidates to hang on. The lower it goes, the more bullish Democrats become on their prospects of taking back the House and then maybe even taking back the Senate. You want to know what difference an approval rating can make? We just showed you on this last one, the ABC News and the Washington Post, the worst number Trump's got right now, 36%. You want to see what that translates into? The generic ballot. When you ask folks which party you want to vote for this November, that 36% approval rating translates into this, a 14-point margin. This just came out this morning. ABC News and the Washington Post Post said, which party you want to vote for this November. They got 52% for the Democrats, 38% for the Republicans, a margin of 14 points. That's one of the biggest ones we have seen. That would obviously represent a wipeout for Republicans, and no coincidence you're getting a 52-38 margin in the same poll that's got Donald Trump's approval rating sitting all the way down at 36%. So we'll keep seeing all the different polls between now and Election Day, but I think keep that in mind. The closer you get to the mid-40s, like the more plausible it is that Republicans hang on. If you've got a consensus of all the polls kind of merging anywhere near 36% on Election Day, you might be very well looking at something like this on Election Day, not just in the House, but in the Senate. So sort of set up the big picture there, and now I'm going to keep looking at this and hopefully not trip on anything because I have to walk about 20 feet here. You're going to get a tour in the background. This is the 4th floor here. I'm going very slowly because I'm going to hit a camera or something. I'm going to walk over to the set where we have some great guests, and I made it. Hi, guys. Let me introduce them now. Corinne Jean-Pierre, she is a senior advisor at MoveOn.org, an Obama White House alum. Michael Singleton, Republican strategist and contributor to The Hill, and Josh Barrow, MSNBC contributor, senior editor at Business Insider. Thank you all for being here. Thanks, I'm curious. Let me just start with this. We've seen that ABC poll has gotten all the attention. You could, link that to a couple things. I said maybe Michael Cohen, maybe Paul Manafort. I just see as we come on the air right now, all these excerpts from this Bob Woodward book that's about to come out are starting to leak. I think that's going to be a big story in the first half of September. What do you think? I mean, Donald Trump. One of the stories is so few people change their mind. Is there a real downward trajectory in his approval rating right now? You think, or is this going to just return to sort of a baseline?
Well, I think there's a real downward trend in his approval rating. As to whether it's going to return to a baseline, I'm not sure. I think another thing that happened is the McCain funeral, and the news cycles around that were very unfavorable to the president. And I think there was sort of a sense that this was a thing that people in Washington and people in the media care about, and was not really something that the public cared about. And yet, it's the polls that were in the field during the time when there was all this coverage around McCain that have been showing these really ugly numbers for him. And we see, 538 now has the average for that generic ballot question, do you want Republicans or Democrats to run Congress? That on average is up to 11 now, the spread between Republicans and Democrats. And, if Democrats, the 538 people think that if Democrats win the popular vote by at least 5.5, they have a better than even shot to take the House back. If they win by 11, they're going to take the House, and they're probably going to take it by some margin. So clearly things have gotten worse. The question is, we still have 2 months left. But the other thing is these polls are largely polls of registered voters. And soon we'll start seeing likely voter models applied by the pollsters. And usually in a midterm election, you'd say that would be good for a couple of points or something for Republicans. But this time around, because engagement is so high on the Democratic side, not as high on the Republican side, it's conceivable that Democrats will even get a little bit more of an advantage out of these polls once pollsters start looking at who's actually going to turn out and vote.
So Michael, from a Republican standpoint, what's the best case in terms of how the next 2 months play out to get Republicans in a position where they could hold out? You're laughing already. Can you envision it? I mean, you don't need to gain seats. You just can't lose 23.
We don't want to lose seats, right? I've been talking to friends at the RNC. I've been talking to friends at the Republican State Leadership Committee who are working on a lot of the state house races, congressional races, et cetera, and they're all concerned about, to your point earlier on, the president's approval rating. If it does dip below a certain percentage, they think it's not only going to be harder to target and mobilize our base, but they're also concerned about donors. One friend of mine said that they're having a hard time articulating to donors why they should continue to give in many of these races, because a lot of donors are saying, we think we're just going to maybe sit some of these House races out and maybe focus on the Senate races. Or maybe altogether, some of them are even saying, we'll just wait until 2020 because we just think by what we've seen in the media that we're likely going to lose the House and we don't want to waste our money on something that doesn't come to fruition. So I think for Republicans, the best thing that we can hope for is that the president doesn't tweet anything else that would become problematic.
I think that's going to happen in the next 2 months.
I don't think so, and I would also say that with this book that's coming out from Woodward, I would hope that the administration is prepared to combat this as much as possible, because again, we're losing voters, suburban middle-class white women voters that are now actually considering to vote for Democrats. Absolutely. Now. That's never happened before. So there's a lot of voters within our typical constituency that we're beginning to lose, in part because of not necessarily the president's positions on policies, but some of his character flaws, and that's concerning.
Can you, Corinne, see a scenario where Democrats don't get the 23-seat gain they need and don't get the House? What would that do to the Democratic Party?
I think we shouldn't sit on our laurels, absolutely, and we should fight like we are 10 points behind, not ahead. And as someone who's worked on multiple campaigns, presidential, I've ran a couple of local campaigns here and there. You always run like you're going to lose because that's just how you should be thinking. When I saw the number 36% of his approval rating in the Washington Post ABC poll last week, I thought back to 2006 when George W. Bush was at 38% and lost both the House and the Senate. And I thought to myself, wow, if I were a Republican right now, I would be really concerned at this 36 number. Now, it seems a little bit like an outlier. We haven't seen any numbers like that. But also, if you look at everything that's been happening just this summer alone, family separation, Helsinki, and then you had the North Korea summit prior to all of that, and then the crazy tweeting around the FBI investigation and all the other investigations around this president. So his temperament clearly is going down. People do not like the fact that he's tweeting. And when you were talking about suburban women, that number, he's also softening with rural women as well. So this is incredibly problematic for Republicans, but Democrats need to stay focused. They need to stay. We're in the home stretch, 60 days, left practically, and we just gotta stay focused.
It's interesting though, because here you go through sort of the more recent, controversies that define the summer. But I can think back to last year as well, 2017, and you had the firing of the FBI director. You had Charlottesville. You had all of these major sort of political crises in 2017. And I remember at points Trump's approval rating fell into the mid-30s in 2017. I mentioned Cohen and Manafort as sort of a benchmark because our own NBC Wall Street Journal poll had been in the field just before that day when at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, both of those things broke at once. We actually, right before that moment, had measured Donald Trump's approval rating at 45 or 46%, which would have been the highest in his presidency in the NBC Wall Street Journal poll, which would absolutely have been at that level that Republicans say they need Trump to be at to win. Then that happened. He fell a few points. Now all these other things have happened. It's a long way of saying there was a Trump rally between the end of 2017 and in the summer of 2018. A modest rally, but enough that Republicans felt it could make the difference. Could there be one this fall?
A really modest rally. It's really remarkable when you look at a chart of President Trump's approval compared to past presidents over their presidencies. It moves around a lot less. He has a ceiling and a floor, and they're pretty close together, or at least so far they seem to be pretty close together. And on some level, I think that makes sense because a normal president, you're sort of evaluating on, how's the economy doing? Here's some new policy that was enacted. Do we think it's maybe not working so well? Clearly, there was a drag on President Obama during the implementation of the Affordable Care Act, that sort of thing. Whereas the issues with Trump are so simple. It's just you look at him and you think, is this a good person to have be president or not? And so I think it's not hard for people to formulate opinion, and there aren't a lot of reasons for people to change their opinions once they've formulated that opinion. So yes, he did. There was a clear trend in public opinion where he sort of hit the bottom in December of 2017, and it sort of steadily rose a little bit. The economy's been going pretty strongly, but it's really remarkable how small that movement was. And I think that that there was no point over the last year where Democrats were not favored to retake the House based on where the generic ballot polling was and where the president's polling is. Now, Democrats are favored substantially more now than they would have been a few months ago because the polling's improved for them. But it's really remarkable. It doesn't move around that much.
Yeah. Well, and in fact, on that note, you guys stay here if you will. I am going to get up and walk back over and again, hopefully not break my neck doing this. But that's a good segue. Something just fell off me. Can you guys hear me? Something just fell off me and crashed. Hopefully, okay, give me the thumbs up. Something's wrong with my equipment, but apparently it's not affecting this. We thought we would take a look at the battle for the House, and we actually have some polling on that front we want to show you. But start with, as we've been saying, what do Democrats need if they want to take back the House? They need to pick up 23 seats. So where would they look for that? Well, the obvious place Democrats could look, and you'll hear a lot about this fall. We've already talked a lot about this. There are 25 districts across the country right now that Republicans represent, that are held by Republicans, but that Hillary Clinton won in 2016. So obviously Democrats look at those and they say, hey, these are voters who already rendered their verdict on Trump in 2016. They already didn't like him to start with. Now you get them in a midterm environment and you basically tell those voters, hey, look, you didn't like him to start with. You maybe haven't changed your mind. You probably haven't changed your mind to look at the polling. How about a check? How about getting a check on him? So Democrats look at these districts as sort of their first line of attack. And we've actually got some polling. How excited are people about politics these days, about elections these days? There's actually a really good pollster out there, Monmouth. We'll probably be hearing a lot from them this fall. They have been doing polling in some of these key House districts. You don't usually get high-quality polls of individual House races, especially this far from an election. But guess what? The folks at Monmouth are great. They've done it. They took a look, for example, this race here in Northern Virginia, Barbara Comstock. This is a Republican. This is a district. This is a part of Northern Virginia. We talk about it so much. It has been trending Democratic for a while now. That really accelerated with Donald Trump in 2016. This is a district that Donald Trump lost by 10 points to Hillary Clinton, but we've got polling there. We got polling out here, go across the country, Southern California. Dana Rohrabacher, controversial Republican incumbent. He's been there for 30 years, pretty friendly towards Russia. He's getting a challenge in a district, again, that Hillary Clinton won narrowly. So we got some polling out of that district. Well, let's take a look. What is the polling showing us in these places? So take a look. In the Rohrabacher race, Monmouth polled this in the middle of July, but after both matchups were set. And look at this. District that Hillary Clinton won by 2 points. Harley Ruda, the Democrat, leading Dana Rohrabacher. Again, talking about Orange County, California here. Rohrabacher's been there for 30 years. Trump has changed the politics of this district. The demographics of the district have changed a little bit. And Democrats think, hey, they got a chance here to capitalize on what Trump has done to that district. The polling suggests, look, it's a close race. Rohrabacher's certainly winnable, but that's right in line with that 2016 Clinton-Trump result in that district. That is what Democrats want to see. Here's another one. I didn't circle it there, but Brian Fitzpatrick. This one is interesting. Here's a Republican incumbent in a district that Hillary Clinton won, Philadelphia suburbs. And this is one where the Democrats actually are not happy with the polling result. They're probably underperforming here. This might get to the issue here. You look at these things where on paper they can make sense. On paper you can get a district that Clinton won. If you put a Democrat who might be a weaker candidate up, and there are some issues have emerged with Scott Wallace just about his basic connection to the district. Is he really, how long has he really lived there? How connected is he to it? Those sorts of things. Well, Wallace seems to be struggling relative to what the Democrat you would think would be doing in a district like this. So candidate quality can matter here. This is one Republicans would badly like to hold on to. And we mentioned it at the top. I was hoping that would be the first one. But Comstock, again, this is exactly what you would expect if you're a Democrat in this district. 10-point Hillary Clinton win in the district. Nominated Democrat in 2018. 10-point lead for the Democrat. Republican incumbent, not just down double digits, under 40%. So Barbara Comstock really might be the most endangered Republican incumbent on the map right now. So, again, gives you a sense of it. Those Clinton districts are ripe targets for Democrats. And you go beyond that. We say there are 25 of those. There are also other, oh, that wasn't supposed to happen. There were some more as well we wanted to show you. But, basically, if you go within any district that was within single digits, that either Hillary Clinton won or Trump won by single digits, basically gets you to about 60 seats, 60 Republican-held seats Democrats might be looking at. We say, though, even when you start using those measures, there are things that come in a midterm year, especially a midterm year, if it turns out to be away, there can be surprises. And I think I just gave the surprise away. But there are going to be races that make no sense on paper and yet become competitive. One might be in southern West Virginia. Southern West Virginia, a district that went for Donald Trump by 50 points in 2016. It's now an open seat. The Republican who represented it ran for the Senate, lost the primary, open seat. Check out this poll from Monmouth. The Democrat there, Richard Ojeda, he was for Bernie Sanders in the primary. He said he ended up voting for Trump. He's disillusioned with Trump. This guy, culturally, he certainly fits the district. He leads this poll by 2 points. Again, Trump won this district by 50. So you can get very unique local factors. West Virginia has a great Democratic tradition, goes back a couple generations. That has changed in the last generation, but you can see here you get the right candidate in the right year. Funny things can happen too if you're your party running with sort of the wind at your back in a midterm. Very quickly, we say the Senate as well. Look, Democrats have 49 right now. They only need to get to 51. It's a net gain of 2 on paper. That's simple. The basic problem for Democrats has been there's really 4 seats right now: Nevada, Arizona, Tennessee, maybe Texas, where Democrats look like they got a shot of picking up seats held by Republicans. And then look at all that real estate Democrats have to defend. These are all states that Donald Trump won. These blue ones here, all Trump states, all represented by Democrats, all Democrats who must run for re-election this year in 2018. So if the Democrats lose just a couple of these, even if they get some gains down here, actually getting to that majority, the math becomes very difficult. And we have a new poll out today, a brand new NBC Marist poll in one of those states, Missouri, one of those Trump states where a Democrat's running for re-election. And we can show you that. Look at that. Dead even. McCaskill, 47. Josh Hawley, the Republican challenger, 47. By the way, we talked about how important that issue of President Trump's approval rating is at mid-40s or higher. That's where Republicans want Trump to be. What's Donald Trump's approval rating in our poll out here in Missouri? it's 45%. 45% Trump approval gets you a 47-47 tie in Missouri. And again, this is one, if Republicans can pick this off, their odds of holding on to the Senate increase dramatically. If Democrats can hang on, it keeps them in the game. The math there, it's difficult, even though Democrats already start at 49 seats. So a little bit of a look at the House and Senate playing field there. I'm now going to walk right back over here. You know, I'm turning my back to the camera because it's probably safer. You're never supposed to do that. But now I'm going to go back to the table here. Let's talk about the Senate a little bit here because it's interesting, Corinne. I'm imagining the day after the election. Yeah. There's this scenario where Republicans lose the House, Democrats get the majority there, and then Republicans gain a seat in the Senate. And I'm imagining Trump is out there saying, by God, we made history. We had an election when everything was against us. The media was against us.
I've heard that narrative. You know, especially when you have that 36 number out there, right? Percentage number, and people are saying, well, now the Senate could be in play. Yeah, I've heard that narrative where, you know, if they are able to gain 1 or 2 on the Senate side, that is a victory for Donald Trump. But here's the thing. Donald Trump announced on Friday that he's going to go to where? Texas. I mean, that is, to me, that is not a place, right? And most people would say that the President of the United States, who was a Republican, should be at all trying to bail out one of their Republican senators. And so, to me, that sets a tone that is really problematic for the Republican Party if they're going to states like Texas. And no, let's not forget, we have Tennessee, we have Arizona. There are a couple of states out there that we can be very competitive. Democrats can be very competitive and can pick up a seat. I'm not sure, but I think I don't think we should throw out the Senate, the U.S. Senate, just yet, and say that we're not going to hold on at least.
The Texas dynamic, Shermichael, is fascinating because of the personality mix there of Ted Cruz and Donald Trump, and what Donald Trump was saying about Ted Cruz and what Ted Cruz was saying about Donald Trump in 2016, and what Donald Trump was saying about Ted Cruz's father, for that matter, in 2016, and where they've landed now, says something bigger, I think, about the Republican Party and where it is, isn't it?
I'm from Texas, and a lot of people don't realize or recognize this, or maybe we just forgot, when Ted Cruz won that Senate seat, he didn't really have opposition. He pretty much won that seat extremely easily. This is the first time he's actually having to really run as a candidate precisely against someone who's developing a ground game, who's running a lot of money, who's trying to mobilize his base. The state of Texas has continuously become more and more diverse. It's been trending that way for the past decade now. But I do think for Republicans, I think we're going to maintain a Senate, and I think we could even gain a seat. I mean, remember, there are 10 Democrats that are running in 10 states that Donald Trump won by 19% or above. Donald Trump has done well with the economy. Republicans like that. Donald Trump has done well with deregulation. Republicans like that. He's doing well with Supreme Court picks.
Would they go along with him? Like, I'm trying to think of the psychology of the Republican Party, because we talk about like a party that suffers a big loss in the midterm. How do they react? So if Republicans wake up after the election and they've lost the House, say they've lost 3 dozen seats in the House, and they gain a seat in the Senate because the map looks like we're looking at, and they pick up a North Dakota, Missouri, Indiana, something like that. And Trump's out there saying, we won, nothing's wrong here. I've actually, defied history. Do Republicans go along with that, or is there unease with that?
Steve, honestly, I think he would have a very difficult time to continue to make that case. I really believe that. I mean, I think for a long time, for a lot of Republicans, again, even those who are some of his strongest supporters, they will say, I don't like some of the tweets. I don't like some of the language. But they will point to more tangible things, again, like some of the policy positions that they will say, you know what, in spite of those things, this is what he has done for me. I like this. I'm going to stick with him. Now, if we face a bloodbath in the House, I think it's going to be really, really difficult for him to go back to those voters and say, well, look, I'm still your guy, because they may say, yeah, you're still our guy as far as policies, but we're losing here, and this is not why we supported you initially. So I do think November will be telling for the president, and it will also be telling for Republicans in the Senate, because if you lose the House, what can you really accomplish if Democrats are controlling the House and we're controlling the Senate? And then Donald Trump, of course, hasn't been the most easiest person to deal with. So again, I'm not certain, at least for the president, that he will continue to be able to maintain that, 90 or 88% approval within the party.
What do you make of it?
Well, so it's not just about how Republicans in Congress feel. If they retain the Senate but they lose the House, then they have to go and they have to make policy with a Democratic-controlled House. And so that's going to create a lot more wedges between the president and Republicans in the Senate, because Democrats in the House will be smart about this. They can seek to attach things, undoing trade policy policies of the presidents that Republicans in the Senate are on the record as hating, that seek more oversight of the president in various ways, or disclosure of certain information, that try to box in his foreign policy more on Russia and other matters. And so it won't just be it can't just be a situation where Republicans in Congress can talk about these things, but nobody brings them to the floor. There will be must-move bills. Things will come out of the House of Representatives that have these things. It will both put Republicans in the Senate in more of a difficult position to stand by the president, and also those who would like to be using that leverage more but don't feel that they have good vehicles for it. It gives them even more leverage because they can basically blame Democrats in the House for the fact that these things have to come out. And I think the president is not likely to react well to that. He'll lash out at both Republicans and Democrats. So I think it'll be a lot harder for the sort of uneasy peace that the president has had with Republicans in Congress. If they only have one House, I think even if they would like to make a united front and try to go make a pitch to Trump voters, please turn out in 2020 and elect Republicans, I think the strategy just gets a lot harder when they don't have both houses.
And I think we're running out of time here, but I do want to, the question I was going to ask was, how long will it take after election night this November for the first Democrat to announce for 2020? Will it be more or less than 24 hours?
John Mulaney is already.
There is, yes.
Avenatti's already out there, so it may have started already.
That's true. That's true. Actually, 2024 is what I meant to say. Corinne Jean-Pierre.
Well, that'll be Kanye.
Sure, Michael Singleton and Josh Barrow. Thank you all for being part of this. I appreciate that. We're going to turn now to Florida, perhaps one of the biggest wild cards in 2018. In every other year, it always seems that way. One of the most interesting primaries of the year. We just saw it last week, that governor's race, the race for Senate, also extremely competitive, dead even in the polls there. My colleague Jacob Soboroff is on the ground, and he's got a whole lot more.
Hey, Steve, it's going to be nuts here in Florida in November. We were here on Tuesday for that stunning primary election victory for both Andrew Gillum, the Democrat, and Ron DeSantis, the Republican backed by President Trump. Gillum, of course, was coming in from the far left of the Democratic Party and shocked a lot of people out here. People outside of the state are saying, look, this is going to be a microcosm of what plays out across the country. In particular, it's going to be a referendum on President Trump and all these big issues like immigration and universal health care and even marijuana are going to come into play, abolishing ICE, criminal justice reform. And those very well may be important issues to Floridians on the ground. But when we traversed most of South Florida for the rest of the week, last week, after that primary election, that's not what we heard at all. We heard in particular about jobs, the economy, and how the environment ties into all of that. We talked to Cuban Americans here in Miami-Dade County. We talked to two fishermen, a Republican and a Democrat, down in Isla Mirada, the sport fishing capital of the world. They took us out on their boat and they showed us how dying seagrass is actually in a position that's caused by men and women, people, could cripple the state's economy, the $4 billion fishing industry down there, and send ripple shockwave throughout the state. They want politicians to focus on that. And then in Big Pine Key, I met a man who was a victim of Hurricane Irma, which struck here exactly 1 year ago. He's still not back on his feet. He doesn't trust a word politicians say, and he says he's not going to go out and vote for anybody. And I guess, Steve, you know this better than anybody. That's the biggest challenge for all of these politicians during a midterm, convincing people that they understand what matters to them, that it's worth going out to vote for these politicians at a time where people are extraordinarily distrustful of them. And if both parties can accomplish that, it looks like turnout was higher in the primary elections here just last Tuesday, then they both feel like they have a shot at taking over not just the governor's mansion here, not just the Senate in the case of Rick Scott, the governor, but also those critically important House seats that will go a long way to the Democrats flipping the House in November. Steve?
All right, Jacob Soboroff down there in Florida. That governor's race, again, I mean, that Senate race, obviously, we'll be spending a lot of time on, but the governor's race, I think, in some ways, could be a preview of our presidential race here in this country in 2020. Well, as the 2018 primaries wrap up, that question there, that word polarization, it's been in the air for so long now. It only seems to be growing. The Democratic Party seemingly becoming more liberal. The Republican Party grabbing Trump a little more tightly. Three of my colleagues over at NBCNews.com have been reporting out the changes in the electorate, the dynamics of the parties. Joining me now to discuss what they have found, Alex Seitzwald, Benji Sarlin, and Jonathan Allen. And if you haven't seen this online yet, I encourage everybody to go look, because they've put together, not only is the writing great, not only is there great critical thought in there, but the packaging on the website is fantastic of this giant piece you guys have all put together. So, well, Alex, let me start with you, because you looked inside the Democratic Party. And it's interesting, because every time a party loses a presidential race, the question is out there, what direction are they going to go in? And there are examples in the past, famously with Bill Clinton, the Democrats had lost 3 straight. They moved to the middle under Bill Clinton. The Democratic Party, after losing in 2016 to Donald Trump, 2 years later, we can say, has moved left.
Definitely, yeah, the opposite of Bill Clinton, but kind of like what the Republicans did after Obama came into power, where they moved to the right. So the party has gotten more liberal, it's gotten more diverse, it's gotten more female, and it's gotten just more aggressive and louder all around. Basically, the kind of consensus between the leadership and the base that this half-loaf incrementalism of the Clinton-Obama era, the base, the most activist part of the base said the only goal that had was to win. We put up with it in order to win. We didn't win in 2016, so let's throw that out and let's just do what we want to do. And it's an experiment. So I went out to Nebraska, Omaha, Nebraska, not a place you would expect to find a fiery, populist, progressive, but she beat a more traditional...
Carrie Eastman.
Yep, running for Congress there. She beat a more traditional former congressman, Democrat in the primary, and now she's running on this full slate Bernie Sanders progressive agenda, and we'll see if she can pull it off in November.
And I'm going to ask, do we have folks in the control room, do we have this ad queued up for that race? Do we have that? We don't have it. Oh, okay. I thought we might have. The perils of asking questions on live TV, but it is interesting because I think there's a PAC out there, Republican PAC, conservative PAC, that's out with an ad today attacking her on all of this. And that's the question I have. You're saying that this calculation of, hey, we tried this sort of middle of the road approach, at least as the Democrats, as these activists define it, it didn't work. So now let's go in this direction. I'm wondering if somebody like Carrie Eastman runs in a district like this and loses, and these attacks like we're seeing in this new ad today work and they resonate and voters say, no, that's too far left to us. What then for Democrats?
Yeah, that's definitely a fear, although maybe not as much as it should be, especially for some on the left who are trying this new approach. Basically, their strategy is that Democrats in Omaha are the same as Democrats in Los Angeles and New York and anywhere else, and if you can get them to turn out, then you don't have to worry about winning over the people in the middle. If that doesn't work, though, then I think you might be back to the drawing board, and we might end up with a correction back in the other direction that says, no, we have to go back and win these people in the middle. There's also a big question, this is a year where there's unquestionably huge enthusiasm in the Democratic Party across the board responding to Trump. What happens in a year when that doesn't exist? Can you still run on a super progressive platform in a place like Omaha, Nebraska, and win? And so we'll just have to see what happens.
And Benji, you wrote about this. This is sort of an academic term, but I think it really is a defining term now for our politics. Negative partisanship. And I'll try this again because there was a line from your story that jumped out at me. Do we have that? Can I put that up on the screen? Oh, I am so sorry. This is. I thought we might have had that, but basically it was the idea, and I'll paraphrase here, and you can put it in better words than me. Mm-hmm. Folks these days, they spend all day on their phone. They swim in the news. It's on Twitter. It's on Facebook. They're checking their favorite news sites, and they, in some ways, they have more information than ever, but they're also more isolated than ever from the other side of the divide.
It's right. And not only they're more isolated from each other in terms of what kind of information they get, in terms of what their opinions are, what conversations they're having, even geographically, they also just don't like each other as much. And this is something that came up in our own polling that we did for this story. About half of Democrats and Democratic-leaning respondents in a SurveyMonkey NBC News poll we did here rated the other party as a 0 out of 10. And with Republicans, it wasn't that far off. It was at 42%. And those numbers have actually, especially on the Democratic side, gotten worse even since just 2 years ago. And this is something that political scientists have been looking at for a long time. They've done these kind of thermometer 0 to 10 tests for decades. And what they found was that the average rating that partisans give the other side has gone from somewhere around the mid-40s, even around 50 in the 80s, to a new low of 23 degrees in 2016. Ooh. And it's probably trending even worse since then. They don't have their updated numbers since. But the basic idea here is that people vote less and less by which party they like and which party they aspire to have in the White House enacting an agenda, and much more based on which party they fear and loathe and want to keep out of Congress, out of the White House at any cost. And we're really seeing that in the types of campaigns people are running in this midterm election on both sides.
And I want to come back to that for a second, but I'm being told we do have some news I want to make sure I share with everybody. If you're on Twitter, maybe you just saw this, but Cindy McCain, the widow of John McCain, apparently just tweeted out that the appointment for her late husband's seat is going to go to John Kyle, former Republican senator. He had been a senator before Jeff Flake from 1994 to 2012. He had been helping in the lobbying effort for Brett Kavanaugh, the president's choice for the Supreme Court, who's going through some interesting hearings this morning, I guess you could say, if you've been watching those. But John Kyle, former three-term Republican senator, will apparently, at least according to a tweet from Cindy McCain, will apparently be the interim appointment. What that would mean is he would take the seat. If this does indeed happen, he would take the seat. He would hold it through 2020. It would then be up before the voters then. Does it say, I'm just going to ask my producer right now, does it say in this tweet at all if he'd run again, if he's a caretaker or anything about that? No, nothing about that. So I think John Kyle's about 76 years old. So I think there'll be a lot of immediate speculation that this would be a caretaker situation.
It'd be awesome if he decided to play coy on what he's going to do on the Kavanaugh confirmation to see what he can extract from the White House, right? Make his replacement there, come and lobby.
and if he doesn't have to run for re-election again, what can you do? Yes.
I think we call that chutzpah in the business.
I have a feeling he's not going to go in that direction, but in this day and age in politics, we don't know. Benji, to finish up with you, though, it is the implications, though, the bigger picture implications for where politics is going. I mean, one of the themes of the Trump era has been the sort of how much our government depends on, is certainly at the legislative branch, what they call norms, sort of unspoken rules, traditions that people follow. Those seem to be breaking down because of that exact dynamic that you're describing.
They are, and there are critics of this, but there's also people who are kind of happy, think some of these norms were overdue for a change, and this is on the left and right. You saw, for example, McCain's funeral the other day, where there was this kind of coming together of the kind of old center-right and center-left establishment that really ran politics for a very long time, and that, they keep things running by negotiating a careful deal between these great statesmen. Well, that had a lot of critics on the right and left who wished that the parties were more distinct, that they relied less on these kinds of, old friends getting together and hashing out, a deal in the middle, and more on just fighting each other and one side winner takes all. And we're seeing that reflected in the midterm campaigns right now, where, like Alex was saying, Democrats don't want half a loaf anymore. We see it on the Republican side, where it's expressed a little less in policy sometimes, but more in the sense that there's no need to adhere to norms of politeness or increasingly even issues of rule of law if it means conceding a single point to an opponent on the other side. So this is something that it's a phenomenon that's very real, but people aren't sure how much they like it or not yet.
And John, you wrote about tribalism. Tribalism in the Trump era. There's there's polarization, and then there's tribalism. What's the difference in how are you measuring it?
Well, so basically what you've got on the Republican side is, rather than going right or left, you've got a Republican Party that has basically attached itself completely to Donald Trump, the person. And, we've seen this as he's sort of the apotheosis of the Tea Party movement. There used to be this schism between the Tea Party and the establishment Republicans, and we've seen some break-off never-Trumpers. But for the most part, once he won that nomination, victory brought the establishment underneath the sort of Trump umbrella, and we see in polling is 90% roughly of Republicans approve of the job that Donald Trump is doing. The tribalism comes in when people define their values and their party values, their partisanship, their political values by this particular individual. There's a guy named Tom Schultz at the Club for Growth who used to be the data guy for Ted Cruz, and he has what he calls a Trump tribalism score that's based on all kinds of data that he has about voters and a lot of survey research, a lot of questions that he's asked voters over time. And what he finds is that Republican voters, most of them, these Trump tribal voters, will take the position that Trump has taken, whether or not they agreed with it before, whether or not it was to the left of where they were before or the right of where they were before. And we see this not only in voters, but also in candidates. Mike Braun, the Senate candidate in Indiana, has completely attached himself to Trump. I spoke to him earlier this summer during sort of the heat of the tariff moment, and I asked him what he thought about subsidies to offset some of the pain that farmers are feeling from tariffs. And he said he thought that subsidies were a bad idea. Then Trump, literally within an hour of that conversation, came out in favor of subsidies, and the next morning Braun's team sent me a statement clarifying that he was now in favor of the subsidies. So you see it not only at the voter level but also at the candidate level, this sort of complete definition of what it means to be a Republican right now as measured by how close you are to Donald Trump on all and every issue.
And you mentioned, too, we can get this plug in there, that Indiana Senate race, Mike Braun challenging Joe Donnelly. A lot of folks think that Donnelly kind of lucked out in the 2012 race there. Well, NBC News and Marist, our polling partner, we have a brand new poll on the Indiana Senate race that we are going to be unveiling tomorrow. So we will find out. Remember, that is a state. It's obviously Vice President Mike Pence's home state. That's a state that Donald Trump won by 19 points in 2016. You got a Democrat running for re-election there. There's some interesting regulations in that state when it comes to polling, so we don't get a lot of numbers out of Indiana. Well, guess what? NBC and Marist, you can always count on us. We have a poll tomorrow on that race, so a lot of people will be eagerly awaiting that, and we will bring it to you, obviously, as soon as we have it. But my thanks for now to Alex Seitz-Walt, Benji Sarlin, Jonathan Allen. Again, greatpiece.com covering all aspects here. A big picture of this 2018 election season. I want to thank everybody for watching. And again, we said it at the top, every Tuesday, from now until Election Day, we are going to be right here. I'll start out at the board. I will awkwardly walk over to the set. I'll probably drop equipment. Maybe some news will break during the show. Lots of fun things happen. I'll call for graphics that I was probably supposed to ask before the show if we had or not. You can watch it all in all of its blemished glory here every Tuesday between now and the election 2/18 in 2018. I'm Steve Kornacki, and I will see you next week.